Hi boys and girls, it's Tia from Make Your Mark. Let's make something fun together today. I'm gonna show you how to make the candy corn shelf sitter today. So I'm gonna unpack my kit here and show you what you have inside first. So let me pull these things out gently. Here's my little guy in here. So you have most of these things. You don't have this ceramic tile. I just brought this along to set him on so that you can see. So we're gonna make this together today, little clay candy corn guy, and I'm gonna show you step by step how to do it. Now this does require baking if you want to make him hard and permanent. Mine right now is not baked, so he's somewhat soft. You can still use him if he's not baked. So just so you know, it does require baking in the oven, this type of clay. It doesn't air dry, so it's not gonna dry hard on its own. So you have to put it in the oven at 275 for the moms and dads out there, whoever's helping your little one make this. You do have to put it in the oven on 275 for about 45 minutes. Now, the legs are made of twine and they shouldn't burn, so the temperature's low enough that they shouldn't burn, so don't be worried about that. But you can leave him soft and not baked. He'll still sit upright and you can still use him. But if you would like him to be permanent and last a long time, I would recommend baking it. So let's go ahead and unpack the kit. You have a baggie full of things here. Your kit has the same things that my kit has, so let me take all of the things out. We have a paintbrush, 2 colors of paint for the candy corn. The top of his body is just left white, the color of the clay, so you don't need any white paint. You'll just need the orange and the yellow. I also have a paper towel. This kit, this baggie is full of all of the things that you need for the details on your candy corn, and then you have the clay. So let's go ahead and start with the clay. Now I would not work directly on furniture with this. I know you guys were gonna maybe go to a park, so you probably have a picnic table or something else to work on, but I wouldn't work on good furniture with this clay because it is oil-based and it has some oil in it and it will leave a mark. So always work on a paper towel or a paper plate so you can lay your clay right on your paper towel. That's what that's for, and also it's to wipe up any paint that you might get somewhere that you don't want it. So the first step is to go ahead and make your clay soft. So I'm going to break this up into smaller pieces first. It's a lot easier to work with than trying to soften all of it at once. So I'm gonna break this up into smaller pieces and I'm gonna work with this clay and make it nice and soft. Now I'm not going to keep the video rolling while I soften all of this. I'm gonna stop the video here and I'll turn it back on when I have all of my clay soft. So I'll be right back. Okay, let's go ahead and continue making our clay candy corn. I'm going to move my paper towel out from under my clay just so that you can see my clay a little bit better. It's hard to see white clay on a white paper towel because there's no contrast. And I do have another piece of paper here to work on, so I'm not working directly on the table. What I'm going to do now is take all of those pieces of clay and put them all together. I want you to take a piece that's about, as big as your thumb, the end of your thumb. If I put this on the end of my thumb here. Take that much clay away before you put all of your other clay together for the candy corn's body. You're gonna need this amount for the shoes. So you're gonna need this for the shoes of your candy corn. You'll also need it for the eyes. If you look at the eyes on here, you can make the eyes 2 layers. So when we get to the part about the eyes, you can either put the eyes right into your candy corn, or you can add a little bit of clay, and I'll show you how to do that to make the eyes like my example. So you're gonna break off a small piece, and then you're gonna have a big piece, and then the rest of it is for the candy corn's body into one big piece. And I'm still working with it and making it soft. And the reason why making the clay soft is important is because you are conditioning the clay and making it an even consistency all the way through. So you can see I'm using the palm of my hand and I'm just pushing, and then I'm going to roll this clay into a ball. Another name for a ball is a sphere. So I'm gonna roll this clay into a sphere either with one hand on the table in little circles, or I'm gonna put it between my two hands, cup my hands around it, try to make it into a ball, and then roll between my two hands like this to make a nice sphere. We always start with the basic form when we're working three-dimensionally. So when you're working with clay, you always start with the basic form, which is a sphere. So now I have my ball of clay ready to start forming into the shape of the candy corn. If you look at him, his overall shape is kind of triangle shape. So we need to slowly change this sphere into more of a triangle. And the way you do that is you take the clay between your two hands like this and you roll back and forth. This is going to make a cylinder. A cylinder is also a basic form. So we know what a sphere is, and now we know what a cylinder is. And you may already know these things from school. So now what's happening is it's turning into more of like a marshmallow shape. So it's getting taller than it is wide. So I'm gonna keep working, and I don't want it too tall, because what I'd like to do now is change that sphere into more of a cone shape. A cone means it's wide at the bottom and a little more pointy at the top. And the way I do that is put that cylinder on its side, and I'm going to roll, and I'm using more pressure on one end. Doesn't matter if it's this end or this end, but I'm gonna roll and put a little more pressure on one end of that cylinder so that it becomes a little more pointy. And I'm not making it too long because I do need my candy corn to be sort of short and stubby so that he can stand up. Look how thick he is from the side. So I don't want to make it too tall. So you can see now it's starting to get just a little bit more narrow at the top, and it's still a little bit wider at the bottom. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to lay that cone shape right on its side, and I'm going to use the palm of my hand, and it's best if I turn it this way so it's long ways like my hand is, and I'm going to press, just gently press down. You always want to change the shape of clay gradually. Can't do it too quickly. So now I have a shape that's turning into more of a candy corn shape. Now I still have to work with this a little bit more, but I flattened it with the palm of my hand, and this is what it looks like. Now you can see I have a little bit of a divot in there at the top, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that down and form that with my fingers. Always want to be gentle. You can put it down on the table, and you can form it with two hands like this. I'm trying to make the top of that a little pointy and nice and smooth. And I don't want to have lumps and bumps in there, so I'm trying to push gently on both sides to keep it symmetrical. So the left side and the right side should match. Now I'm going to continue working on flattening this a little bit more, making the top a little more pointy, pushing where it looks bumpy, and gently just pressing and pushing until I have a shape that looks or resembles a candy corn. So I'm getting a little bit closer to that shape. You can see it's taking a little bit of time. When you're working three-dimensionally, like I said, you have to be gradual about moving the clay. So now I have a little bit more of a pointy top. What I want to do now is make the bottom flat so that he can sit on his own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my candy corn upright like this, and I'm still holding it on the sides so that I'm not pressing in one particular spot with too much force. And I'm just going to gently press. I'm just going to gently press down towards the table or whatever surface you're working on so that he starts to balance, or she starts to balance on its own. So So you can see how thick that is if I measured with my fingers. It's wider than my finger. You can see it on each side. And here it is from the front. The bottom is starting to get flat. So now I have my candy corn shape. Next, I'm going to put the legs in. Hold on, I'm gonna pause this for 1 sec. Okie dokie artichoke, sorry about that. So here's my candy corn shape. I wanna make sure it balances and stands on its own. So I'm pushing down. See how I'm holding it by the palms of my hands here, and then I'm pushing straight down. I know you can't see me pushing, but I'm pushing down towards the table so that the bottom of that candy corn is getting flat. So it should stand by itself when you're done. And that way, when you're sitting it on a shelf, it will balance and his legs will dangle just like that. So the next step is to unpack your little kit of materials here that has the legs and the eyes. So I gave you a little bit of extra of everything. So there's 4 eyes and 4 little nails. The nails are really just to use to push the string into the bottom of the clay, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Now, if you aren't baking this in the oven, which if you're out at the park doing this, then you won't have access to an oven. So I would suggest painting it first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my paints here. I have yellow and I have orange. Yellow is on the bottom of a candy corn and orange is in the middle. So if you know about fractions, if we have 3 colors, the bottom section would be 1/3. So we're going to paint 1/3 of our candy corn yellow. And if you notice, when you're painting something 3-dimensional, you have to paint all the way around. So I'm painting the front, the sides, and the back. Now, it's up to you if you paint the bottom or not. You won't see that when it's sitting on the shelf. So sometimes I don't paint the bottom just because if I'm going to let it dry, I'm going to let it sit on the bottom, and that way I won't get paint anywhere, and it won't have to dry at all. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to paint the bottom of my candy corn around the bottom third. So I'm just getting a little bit of paint on my brush, not too much, and I'm painting right on this clay, even though the clay is soft. On the front side, I'm going to paint up about 1/3 of the way. That way I know when I do the sides and the back just how far to go. So I'm going to do this quickly. You take your time. You have a little bit of a smaller brush. Smaller brushes are easier to handle, so I gave you a small brush. So I'm going to paint all the way around the fronts, the sides, the backs. There's only one front and one back, but there's 2 sides. So now I have the bottom of my candy corn painted yellow. Now you don't have water to rinse if you're working outside, but that's okay because what you can do is you can take your brush and you can just wipe it on your paper towel to get all of that yellow paint off. And the beauty of this is, let me set this down to dry. The beauty of it is that yellow is actually used to make the color orange. Red and yellow make orange. You probably already know that. So even if I do have a little bit of yellow still on my brush, it's okay because yellow is a part of orange already. So I can just kind of mix it around in there. And I gave you a lot of paint, so you'll have a lot left over. You can use it for something else if you want. And you can keep that brush that's in your kit. All right, so I have a little bit of orange. Now, if you're careful, I don't usually recommend painting the next step until the first step is dry, but if you're careful, you can go ahead and paint the next third. So this would be 2/3 of the way up the candy corn. If you're careful, you can paint while the yellow is still wet. The only thing that you might run into is that the orange may blend a little bit into the yellow if it touches. It's kind of tricky to turn it. What I do sometimes is I set it down and then I reposition my hand and turn it, because you don't want to smear it. That's the tricky part. Now, if you can paint while it's balancing, that's fine too. It's a little bit tricky to see though. I like to turn my creation while I'm painting. if it's three-dimensional. So I'm just carefully painting the orange all the way around the front, the sides, and the back of my candy corn. See how I just repositioned that? Now, if you have time, ideally you can let that yellow dry first, but to save time, I'm just carefully painting the orange right above the yellow. And even if it blends a little bit, I don't mind that. Now you decide if you want to paint more than 2/3 of the candy corn orange and you only want a little bit of white peeking up at the top. If you look at a real piece of candy corn, sometimes there's a lot of white at the top of the triangle. It's almost like a pyramid, isn't it? Sometimes there's a lot of white, sometimes there's a little bit of white. So you judge how far up you want your orange paint to go. Now, if you're outside doing this and you don't have water, I would recommend wiping your brush off as much as you can so that that paint doesn't dry in your brush. And then I fold this sometimes just to make sure that I'm not getting it all over the place. All right, I can set my brush aside because I'm done with that now. I'll put the lids back on my paints. I could even put those back in the bag because I'm done with those. And I'm letting my candy corn dry. You do want to let it dry at this point all the way because you have to handle it quite a bit to put the legs and the eyes in. So this small piece is for making little eyes. So if I roll this and then break it into 2 equal pieces, sometimes I just use my fingernail to mark it. And then I break it into 2 equal pieces. If I roll this into a sphere, I can press that onto my candy corn's face, just like that, and then take one of these beads and put it right into the clay. So that's one way to make the eye. So if you want to do it that way, you have to take a little bit of clay away so that you can make the eyes like that. So you roll it into a sphere, you press it onto your candy corn's face, just like that. And then you take the bead and you push it into, I try to turn it on its side. It's a little bit tricky. One thing you can do, here's a little trick, is take your little nail, stick it in through the hole of the bead to pick it up, and then I like to put it sideways so that you cannot see the hole, as opposed to the way that I just showed you, which you can see the hole. And then you would take the other little piece, roll that into a sphere, press that down, and then get your nail with the bead. I keep dropping it because it's so tiny, and then push that in. So that's one way to do the eyes. And sometimes you can see your fingerprints there. You can try to smooth that out with your finger. And again, you're trying to get those eyes symmetrical if you can, but they don't have to be perfect because these are a cute little thing. And then the other piece that you take away is going to be for the shoes. So you would roll that into a sphere, then roll it into a cylinder, break that in half so that you have 2 equal pieces, and these are going to be for the shoes. I'm going to use this little nail to make a mouth, so you can just gently carve the mouth in using this nail. I like to make a smiley face, so there's his cute little face. And then when it's completely dry, I'm going to turn him upside down and I'm going to poke his legs right in to the bottom of his body. So I'm taking this string and I'm using the nail, and I'm using the head of the nail, which is the flat end, and I'm pushing that string up inside, and then I'm flipping it over and I'm using the nail to push the string in, and I'm going to leave that nail in there to kind of hold it in place. Now you don't want to tug on this because it will come out. So I'm holding it in place with my finger, taking the flat end or the head of the nail, I'm pushing the string in, to the bottom of the clay. This is the tricky part. I'm going to give it a good couple of pushes. I'm not just putting the end in. I pushed it about a ½ inch to an inch up from the end so that I have two pieces hanging out. The end is still hanging out and then the long piece is still hanging out. Once I have it in there pretty well, I'm going to flip it over, put the pointy end in. You might need a grown-up's help with this part. All right, so now I have both legs in there. And his legs are hanging. Now all I have to do is make his feet. So you're going to take your two little feet, you're going to roll them into spheres. We always start with a basic form. Then I'm going to roll them into cylinders. So they look like big Tic Tacs, if you ever had that kind of candy, Tic Tac. Now I'm going to flatten them just a little bit with my finger. Just using my finger and laying it down on that cylinder and pressing. Now I'm going to take the end of my string, I'm going to place it right on that little foot the long way. And then what I want to do is I want to hold it with one thumb. With the other hand, with my pincher fingers, I'm going to try to pinch the clay around the string so that the string stays in there. Just like that. So I want that clay to stay on the end of my string. So I'll show you again with this one. Pressing. So I have a flat cylinder, so it's like an oval shape. I'm going to lay my string right along the oval, hold it with my thumb, and then with my pincher fingers, I'm going to fold that clay around the string. So I'm making little shoes. Now you can paint those shoes whatever color you want. You can shape them with your pincher fingers. You want to try to make them match so it looks like a pear. And then I can get my brush back out and paint the feet if I want to, or I can just leave them white and they're gonna dangle when you put your candy corn on the shelf. So I hope that you had fun making this candy corn shelf sitter with me, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and I'm looking forward to making something with you again next time. Bye, boys and girls. See you next time.